Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday, you said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true! Just do it! Some people dream of success while you're gonna wake up and work hard at it. Nothing is impossible. You should get to the point where anyone else would quit, and you're not gonna stop there. No, what are you waiting for? Just do it! Just do it! Do it! Yes, you can! Just do it!
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get the ticket laws, we enforce them. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan liberty for all. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is Thursday, December 10th, 2015. I'm having an issue with the fucking sound where I got to turn like everything up for it to register. And I noticed yesterday's show I had listened to, and no, maybe it wasn't yesterday's show. Maybe it was another show. The sound wasn't, I don't know. With this new fucking Spreaker studio, I just been having some issues. So it really depends on how it comes out. But I think it's fucking up my backup, which actually is better than Spreaker. The Zoom 4HN, it records higher quality audio than Spreaker, and then most people use for their podcasts that free application that I have too, and I use it like to cut up audio. Why can't I think of it now? I have to go look it up. Audacity. But I got to get this shit straight. So this weekend I'm gonna work on perfecting the sound. Not that the sound is coming out bad, but making sure that I don't end up fucking it up because my levels are not showing me correctly where they should be at. Because really what you're supposed to be able to do is read your fucking levels by the LED meters. And on Spreaker I have those, and I have those on the mixer, but now they're way higher than they were before, and I have no idea why. So I don't know. We'll figure that out then. That's a whole another issue, but I like to share that. I like to share what's going on for people that are interested in starting their own podcast and different things here and there with issues and stuff like that, just to share with other people that either have their own podcast or are thinking of starting their own. And it is a lot of work, but thank you for tuning in. We're on weeknights, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen on Spreaker and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. We promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, as well as exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. Before I get into our main topic for tonight, which I'm not going to talk about much else, it will kind of combine the last 2 days. I mean, this week has been almost a theme week, not even on purpose, where Tuesday, Shire Dude came on and we had talked about the religion of Islam as a whole. Let me give Shire Dude a plug.
ShireDude.com.
And yesterday I had talked about the ridiculous fucking shit that's coming out of the president's mouth about guns. And it also related to, we got into some of the stuff. Well, I wouldn't say it was we. It was really just me. But I got into some of the stuff regarding the so-called terrorist attacks. So now I'm kind of taking those and going a step further and getting into ISIS, really, and how the U.S. is a bigger terrorist. The U.S. government is more of a terrorist organization than ISIS will ever be. So we'll get into a little of the history of ISIS. And a lot of this, I will admit, is speculation. Now, this is coming to you from the perspective of my opinion, what I have seen, what I have read. This isn't the news. This isn't the fucking nightly news, which I'm probably more accurate than they are anyway. But they're supposedly giving you unbiased news. And we've talked about how that's just so not the case. But that's what their job is. My job is I'm a commentator on different things. Sometimes I'll cover just concepts or topics or different things regarding concepts of liberty or what I think of the government or how it should work, and then sometimes we'll cover specific stories, which I haven't done as much of that recently. Although this week we got into some current news. And tonight we will too, getting back to those terrorist events. So really that's what I do. Now, I'm not going to give any misinformation on purpose or tell you that this is a fact. And I'm sure that I read this in the New York Times or something like that if I didn't. So the majority of the things that I will talk about, unless I specifically state that, I know this for a fact, it's a lot of speculation. And that's really without access, obviously, to the government and to their files. I can't prove any of this. There are declassified documents that do support some of this stuff, actually. So I take that back because there are some declassified documents that support some of this stuff. And there's some leaks like Bradley Manning about the Iraq war and why they were there and how many people they killed and things like that. So some of this stuff is actually out there and has been verified. But the fact that ISIS works directly for the CIA or MI6 or one of those organizations, a lot of things point there, but ultimately it's speculation. It's speculation based on my research and actual speculation based on facts. It's not coming out of nowhere, but it's still, either way, however you want to look at it, speculation. So I want to be clear on that because I'm not here to misrepresent facts. If it's something that I'm speculating on or I think or is my opinion, which a lot of the stuff is my opinion based on facts. And that's really what I think commentators do is, okay, here's this article and They comment back and forth on it, whatever their opinion is based on that. And if you would like to join in the conversation, please feel free. 702-470-7664. 702-470-7664 is the number to call in, or you can Skype in, use Nonpartisan Liberty for All, one word, and send a contact request with your name and where you're calling from and what you want to talk about. And if you're going to call in, if possible, if you could text first, that would make things a lot easier because I could go right to your call. So if you text and then just call, I'll go right to your call as opposed to screening it, because basically that's the screening right there is the text. I don't need to sit there and screen like they do on all these bullshit shows to make sure that they're gonna agree with the host or whatever they do. I mean, I really don't give a fuck, and I don't get that many calls anyway, so who cares? And ultimately, I can always turn you down or hang up on you, so I have the ultimate power, at least when it comes to that, the limited power that I have in life, I guess. So what I wanted to talk about first, because I'm really getting sick of this fucking shit. I'm getting, and what actually made me feel better, and I won't say who it is, but they actually kind of validated my statement or feelings about this. So I don't want to, say who that was, because it would probably be bad for them, but they validated essentially, or they helped to validate my feelings about it, even though I didn't need validation. I mean, that's how I felt, and nobody could tell me otherwise on this, but it was good to have somebody else who's closer to the situation say, yeah, that's pretty much how a lot of other people feel as well. So that made me feel a little better. And again, I didn't feel bad about it anyway. I wasn't having like a mental conflict, like, oh, I feel bad that I feel this way. No, I don't. But I hate putting people down or insulting people or making people feel bad. It's the making people feel bad. And this person won't feel bad anyway. They don't give a shit. But I'm not that type of person. I'm not the type of person where I'm going to do a show with somebody where we argue back and forth and yell at each other. I'm not the type of person that I'm going to just insult people for the sake of insulting people. If I insult somebody, it has to be something bad that you do to me first. I might share things with my fiance that she'll get mad at me, but I wouldn't say to that person's face because I wouldn't want to make them feel bad. Like if some girl was like really fat and I'm like, oh, your friend is really fat, she'll get mad at me. And of course I would tell her, well, I'll never say that to their face because I wouldn't want to hurt their feelings. I'm not that type of person where I know what it's like to be put down and it doesn't feel good. And there's no reason to just put somebody down that hasn't done anything to you. Or, even that, like if it's something that annoys me, but has nothing to do with me as far as meaning they never did anything to me, I usually won't say anything either. Unless it really has to push me pretty far to say something. Otherwise, I won't say anything, or I won't say anything publicly. I'll just maybe say something to my fiance or something like that. But I wouldn't say something on the air if it had nothing to do with me, but it pissed me off. But in this case, it has to do with people or a person, I guess, mainly, that has done nothing but been an asshole to me since the beginning. So I don't mind really saying this. Unfortunately, it might insult other people in the process. That's not my intention, but it's the reality of the situation, and I think it's something that needs to be said. So I think last week I finally fucking came out and said, and this took me a long time. I kindly, it wasn't kindly, but it wasn't even that bad, because I said how I respected them and how I still respect what they're doing. But I came out and said of Ian Freeman of Free Talk Live that I think he's an arrogant ass, and I do not like him. And it took me a long time to even come out and say that. And it's based all on his treatment of me, and then I see how he treats other people regarding their shows, and then how he treats me. And I know for a fact, and not that I compare my show to other shows, but I mean, he violated some of his rules that he has for shows that he puts on his station, and continues to do that, and kind of just, throws my show, or did in the past, because now I want nothing to do with LRN. But the only reason I ended up getting on it was because of Mark, who's the co-host anyway. So just for those who don't know, and most of you do, Free Talk Live is the biggest freedom and liberty-oriented radio show in the country, if not the world. It's syndicated on 160 stations, and it does a lot for freedom. I really believe it does. I believe also that it could do a lot more if it wasn't for the fact that Ian is an arrogant ass, and he's very stubborn from what I understand. And you can even tell a lot of times on the show the way he acts towards people. So I had also mentioned him when it came to Muslims for Liberty, and this has nothing to do with Muslims for Liberty, but the fact that he lets Will Culley call in, who's, I guess, the founder, who seems like a nice enough guy. This is nothing against him. And he is someone who converted to a Muslim. He also is under the idea or impression, I don't want to say under the impression, because I don't think represents it, but he believes that, from what I understand, that Islam is compatible with liberty and voluntarism, as does Davi Barker, who wrote a book called Voluntary Islam. And I would like to read it and see his point of view, or even talk to him about it, to be honest. I don't have anything against Davi Barker, although I have said I can't stand and I didn't even say anything really about him before neither, but the fucking Michael Dean, I can't stand him, and he was an ass to me. So that's another person that was an ass to me, who is another arrogant fuck. And they do whole shows about fucking people just to talk about them. Now, I'm going to take maybe 20 minutes or a half hour to talk about a few people based on the way they treated me. Not based on, I just don't like them and I need to fill up time on my show. And he had his whole crew there bashing Chris Cantwell in 2 whole shows. Now, my opinion of Chris Cantwell has changed, but at the same time, I mean, doing a whole show on somebody, that's kind of obsessive. So anyway, And I had seen interviews with him, because after he was kind of an ass to me, not kind of, he was an ass to me, I had watched some of his interviews, and he thinks that he's just the fucking greatest thing alive. And, I was in a band, and, I'm so great. And it's like, fuck you, man. Seriously. It's just, the arrogance of people bothers me, but I didn't say anything about it. So being that I'm saying things about other people, I might as well have add that too. I've told people that, and I've never really told the story, and I'm not gonna, because it's not even worth the time. It's just it was a Facebook thing, and And then I just saw how, of an asshole he was and how he's so arrogant to people. And I know that a lot of people like him, but watch some of his interviews. Look up interviews with Michael Dean and actually watch them. And you'll be like, this guy thinks he's like a fucking Hollywood celebrity. He's on 10 stations or something. And I think 8 of them are, 10-watt fucking stations, but whatever. Whatever he's doing now. He can, of course, come back and say, well, look at me. But I also have a job in the real world where I make, some pretty good money. So and I wouldn't consider this a hobby. It's something I want to do, and I have a lot of work to do. And I'm not saying that I'm better than any of these people, that my show is better, because for the most part, it's not. But I'm looking at it from the point of view of their show as a show that's out there compared to any other show. So I'm not looking at it compared to mine. Mine has nothing to do with it, and it's not about mine being better. When I did mention mine being better than one show, it was like the show was a train wreck. We'll put it that way, and many people have said that. And I think while I don't have the greatest show in the world, I think it's listenable. It's gotten better, and it's not a train wreck. It is what it is. I mean, it could use some improvement in some areas, and I think I'm continuing to improve, and the show will continue to improve. Of course, it's better when I have a co-host, and I do have somebody starting next Thursday that I want to announce. So we'll see how that goes, and hopefully it's supposed to be a permanent thing. I mean, I suppose it could not work out for some reason, but it looks very promising. We agree on a lot of things, and I think it should end up going okay. So I'm looking forward to that. And another announcement, Shire Dude is going to be joining me every other Tuesday, and I think he's very good on the show. He was just on this past Tuesday. Sorry, every other Wednesday. So one Wednesday will be Ken Shorjan, and the other Wednesday will be Shire Dude. So I have Wednesdays covered, and I really like Shire Dude on the air. He has a cool radio type voice, actually, when he wants to. But he has a good voice, and he has good opinions to add. And I think we have some chemistry on the air. So definitely a plus to have him every other week. And then Ken, who's been on for a while now, Ken Shorjan of the Daily Economist, dailyeconomist.com, and Shire Dude of shiredude.com. So that covers my Wednesday. And then my new person who kind of goes by 2 names, so I want to make sure what she wants to go by before I announce her name. But she'll be starting next Thursday, so I'll have Wednesdays and Thursdays covered. So that will be a positive thing, to add more co-hosts and not just have me sitting there talking for 3 hours, annoying people. But anyway, my point being that this is not about my show. I'm just some little show doing something out of my bedroom. Yeah, I've invested some money and I've gotten better, but this isn't about me. I don't have a big network at this point that represents itself as the biggest and best in the country or something like that, whatever LRN says. And I'm not somebody who's out there bragging about how good I am or how great my show is or anything like that. And for the most part, I don't waste my time talking about other people. But once in a while, I think some things need to be said, and really, I've gotten to the point where, as far as LRN goes, which is Ian's hobby, it's getting to the point where I think it's a fucking joke to me. I'm sorry, and I'm not saying that, well, anything I'm doing is any better, because it's not. But I mean, I'm also working full time and trying to do this, and I'm trying to build up from nothing. I'm just starting out. Yes, it's been a year and a half doing a show, but I'm just starting out a network, and hopefully I can even do it. You know, I mean, the fact that somebody can even do that, I give them respect for that. But I've lost all respect for that network. I don't think there is a network that I'm aware of that's a libertarian, a true libertarian, or voluntarist or anarchist or whatever, a station that represents true freedom and liberty that exists, that is on the level with anything that's on regular radio, except maybe late night programming. And Mark Edge did bring that up to me. Like, the people that do like the late night shit aren't too good. So basically you have Free Talk Live. Even though, my feelings for Ian being an ass and his arrogance and how I feel that he's kind of treated me, and I don't even really know him that well. This is just through messaging. But with my show and things along those lines, and if you just thought, hey, the show isn't, because I gave him an opportunity to say, look, your show is not my type of show and whatnot, but he still wanted it on LRN in the podcast loop. But I wasn't good enough to get an actual slot because New Hampshire came first. However, now I know there's a show that's going on with 2 more people that don't live in fucking New Hampshire that are getting a slot. So whatever. But really, one of the other reasons I say this is because I was watching, I ended up watching Chris Cantwell on Cop Block Radio, and it was like a fucking train wreck. I mean, I disagree with him on a lot of things now. I don't want to get into a whole rant on Chris Cantwell, but I mean, he pretty much just dominated the conversation. He has some points, but he comes off that racism doesn't exist. But they had nothing to counter his points. They sounded like hacks. I'm sorry, guys. You need a lot of work there. Whoever's on Cop Block now, and I know Dio's on there. He really didn't talk much, so I don't know that I can really count him in that. And one of the other people I know, and they've called the show before, so I hate to say it like that because I don't have anything against them, and it's something that you can always get better at. You just got to put the time in and the effort. And so I'm not trying to insult any of the people on Cop Block Radio, but none of these shows really, besides Ernest Hancock, who I think is great, and of course Free Talk Live, could compete with anything on regular radio. And this is what I've been kind of talking about for a while now, but I'm just coming out now and kind of really, going hardcore with it, that it makes the liberty movement, if you want to call it that, or shows that aren't conservative or progressive, it makes all the freedom shows look bad. It really does, because really all we have is Free Talk Live, Ernest Hancock, Adam Kokesh, what's his name? Stefan Molyneux comes off professional, although I don't agree with everything he does, but at least he comes off somewhat professional in his delivery and how he does his show. And I mean, there might be a couple other shows. Puke and the Gang, I thought was very professionally done. It's more of a comedy show, though. And, but, and there's other shows out there. So I don't want everybody to take it as I'm insulting them, and then they'll come back and say, well, your show sucks. And I'm like, well, that may be true, but my point is looking at everything as a whole. And I'm not on any major so-called major network that's viewed as this big liberty network. I'm just doing my show on Spreaker. I mean, so if you're on one of these networks, and yes, I created my own little network, but again, no one even knows much about my show anyway. So to say that, well, you're making the Liberty Media look bad or something, even though I think what I do is a little different as far as some of my views compared to a lot of the people in the Free State Project, but no one really knows about me any fucking way. But for the shows on LRN, this is a station that is listened to, that people go to. If they're trying to find liberty-oriented content, that's where the fuck they're going. And it's turning into, and I don't know that it was any better in the past, but it's a lot of the shows, and at least since I started listening, are a fucking joke. It's hack fucking, it's high school radio. A lot of it. And I know it's a fucking hobby to Ian and whatnot. And he has come out and said that it's a hobby, but you have rules, but you break your rules and whatever. It's your fucking thing. You can do whatever you want. But I can criticize you however I fucking want to. But have some fucking standards, man. And I know it's hard because even trying to get people to do shows on my little network, when you can't pay them, it's hard. And I realize that. But I'm not in New Hampshire neither, where there's so many fucking shows. And I'm also not talking about the shows that the podcast stuff, because like Tom Woods is on there and other people. And I know Daryl Perry does a half-hour show on there as well, and then they replay some other people that are pretty big, the Lionel guy. So I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the original shows that are on LRN, and there are some talented people there. One of them, Ellen Ball, who used to do Wednesdays with me, is very talented. And I don't know the specifics if she was kind of forced into the type of show that she's doing or whatever. But I just think that Ellen could have a very good show with the right people surrounding her, because I think she is very talented. But what's on there now, I don't know. And I honestly hate doing this, because in a way I'm insulting these people that are doing the shows, and that's not my intention. But so, I mean, then you have like a show like I know Rob Matthias, who does the Rebel Love show, and he's just doing a show like a hangout show, and it is what it is. I mean, that's a little different, because he's doing a show about Manchester. It's more of an inside show. I don't know that it's a show that should be on LRN. I think it's definitely a show that should be out there. And I think for what it is, that it's entertaining. I mean, it's more inside stuff, and I know some of that from listening to Free Talk Live. So plus I happen to like Rob as well, and his girlfriend Ann. She's nice, and she came on my show once, and I thought she did a great job. And then you have other people outside of LRN that I'm not even going to go into. So I'm more focusing on LRN, but some of these other networks, it's the same shit. But in between, there are some good people and talented people, like Stephanie Murphy's talented, Brian Sovereign. But they also have other things they have to do, which affects their time, just like with me. I mean, if I was doing this full time, I think it would be 20 to 50 times better. I honestly do. But being that, I have a full-time job that requires me to do a lot of thinking, I'm mentally gone at night, and I still do the show, and you'll see from time to time where I just can't think of a word, and it's just something I know well, and I just can't think of it, just like I couldn't think of Audacity a minute ago, just because I'm mentally drained. So I understand all that, and it's unfortunate that there's not somebody that can invest in a big network that has mostly liberty-oriented shows, real liberty-oriented shows, that has the money to do that and pay people. And I know people can sit there and insult me and laugh and whatever, but that's what I hope to build. And I'm going to try to put some of my money into it as well. So bottom line is, it's sad in a way that this is supposed to be. Let me go to the site and see again what it says, because in a way it's true. I mean, what else is there out there? But then you get this this shit that really, because the way I look at something, and just so people can understand where I'm coming from, and I do it with my show as well. I take whatever shows you hear that are syndicated out there, and Free Talk Live would be up there as well, although I think even Free Talk Live can improve, and I think Ian's holding it back, to be honest. But whatever. But they're still a top tier show. But what I'm saying is it's your source for the best liberty oriented content 24/7. And that's probably true because there's nothing else out there. And my concern that I've expressed in the past over and over again is that there is nothing really besides Free Talk Live. And I don't know what Adam Kokesh is even doing now, but he's definitely talented and was putting some good stuff out there. And Ernie Hancock, I don't know how much attention he gets. I think he's very good as well. But compared to, here's my concern, is that if you compare all these shows, including mine, to, you take the top 20 rated shows out there, and I'm not talking about subject matter, so don't get it confused. I'm talking about a professional sounding radio show that if you heard it on the radio when you're flipping through the channels, you wouldn't think nothing different than any other show. You might stop and start listening to it, and I'm sure that's what happens with Free Talk Live. But to have some of the shows, the majority of them on LRN, that are pretty much like high school fucking quality shows, I think that does make things look bad. And I think at the same time, it's not about it just looking bad. It's that I think there needs to be more freedom and liberty oriented shows that are syndicated, that are out there in the mainstream and that are getting attention. And there's not. And it's because they're not good enough is part of it. I honestly think that it's also because the government controls the media and it's 50 times harder for a Liberty show to make it. And Free Talk Live, put a lot of hard work in to be able to do that. And in talking to Mark and even Ian to get the story of how they came up, I mean, they had to put a lot of hard work in. They had to take a big risk. I mean, Mark told me about when he had moved to New Hampshire and putting that big risk in. And Mark, I really like. I think he is a really good guy. So my feelings about Free Talk Live are conflicted, but when it comes down to it, I mean, it is what it is. It's the same show that I've liked from before. But the other thing, and Ian, I thought he was good on the show before. I think he's good on the show now. Just because I happen to not like him personally doesn't mean that I don't think he's putting out a good show. But I also see some of his faults that I think he happened to see, that I had written to Mark about, things about the show. And he kind of asked me, but he didn't come to me and ask me. It was, I sent him some stuff and I was like, hey, did you want me to write something up? Or he said, why don't you write this more in detail or something like that. So it's not like Mark came to me like, hey, I'll use Dave as a consultant. It was more like I started giving some stuff and then he had liked the things I was saying and was like, do a write-up, or I might have even said, hey, I'll do a write-up. And I know he shared it with Ian, and I had pointed out some of the things that I thought that Ian did that was bringing down the show. And again, this has nothing to do with my show. This is not comparing my show to theirs. This is looking at all these other shows as a fan, as a critic. Because I could sit and critique my show and come up with a whole bunch of shit too. And trust me, I do it all the time. So the fact that I happen to have a show has nothing to fucking do with it. It might give me a better skill set in being able to analyze a show. And plus, I mean, my background as far as my bachelor's in being in film and us analyzing scripts, and then my job since then and a lot of the things that I've done in automation and creating reports and creating reports to automate things. So like looking at things and analyzing them on how to improve them. So I have a lot of experience in that. It's in a different area, but so I do the same thing with my show, and it doesn't mean anything about my show being any better than any other show. And I want to make that clear. That's not what I'm talking about. I happen to have a show as well. If I didn't have a show, I'd be thinking all of the same things, just nobody would be listening to them. But one of the other things that I had brought up, and I didn't go that much into detail, and this is where I found out that other people kind of, I guess, feel the same way, is that every fucking minute I'm hearing about the Free State Project. I'm getting sick of even listening to Free Talk Live, which I think is a great show, besides the one, well, there's a couple aspects, which one is very minor. I think Ian just hangs up on people instead of transitioning into a hang up. I know you got to get through calls. I understand that, but it's just kind of like click right in mid-sentence. And I don't see other shows doing that. They hang up on them, but they do it in a way that they somehow avoid, mid-sentence. Maybe they turn down the sound first. I don't know. But is that it's a constant Free State Project, move to California, move to New Hampshire. Basically, if you don't live in New Hampshire, then you're not for freedom. It's this fucking shit that you're gonna accuse me, and he didn't come out and personally say me, but it seems like he holds something against me because of my opinion about the Free State Project, and maybe that's why, and maybe that's part of the issue with it. Or maybe not. But my opinion is that, just because I don't want to move all the way to fucking New Hampshire, I had already moved 3,000 miles. I was right near New Hampshire in Boston, and I could have fucking moved to New Hampshire before I moved here. Now, I've been here 15 years, so the Free State Project wasn't going on back then. But part of the reason I moved to Nevada was because it had a higher level of freedom than California did, where I wanted to be because of my BA in film. And I figured, hey, I can write scripts from here. And if I have to go to LA, I can drive to LA. So this is the closest I want to be. I'm in a state where it's very gun friendly. Gambling is legal. Prostitution is legal in the rest of the state. Not that I care, but it's just the fact that it's the freedom of it. So essentially, it's like, and I've kind of heard this said before when people called in, like, what should I do? I'm depressed about this or whatever. And it's always, well, come to New Hampshire. Like, that fucking solves everything. Everything is come to New Hampshire, come to New Hampshire. Otherwise, if you don't come to New Hampshire, you might as well fucking kill yourself. Join the Free State Project, or your life is worthless and everything you do is meaningless when it comes to freedom. And it's like, really? That's and I don't know if it's just I'm more conscious of it now, or it's getting worse, because I remember a show in the last few days where I heard it so many fucking times, I stopped listening to the show. I'm like, you know what? I can't listen anymore. And I don't mean I can't listen, period. Like, I'll never listen again. But I'm like, I can't listen today anymore. Because if I hear one more fucking thing about move to New Hampshire, the Free State Project, a lot of your listeners, and this is the fucking point, don't live in New Hampshire and may not want to ever live in New Hampshire. They might respect what you're doing over there, so I think it's fine to talk about, hey, we did this or we did that. But plus, it's not all it's cut up to fucking be, okay? You fucking exaggerate the shit out of it. And I've been to New Hampshire, and I know from even seeing some of the court cases and these judges like Judge Jerkoff or Burke or whatever the fuck his name is, I see that old school colonial bullshit like they have in Massachusetts, where they will drag you out of the court like they did to Pete Eyre for wearing a hat. That's the type of shit that they do in Massachusetts. It's that we've been here forever. You must respect our institutions, and that doesn't seem to be going anywhere neither. Now, I'm not saying that New Hampshire is not one of the freer states. I'm not saying that they're not doing positive things there. I like a lot of people that I know from Facebook in New Hampshire, and even that I've met personally, like Mark and Stephanie Murphy and Brian Sovereign, and I respect them and like them, and I don't think there's anything wrong with what the Free State Project is doing. I actually support the concept. What I don't support is Ian's fucking attitude towards people that don't want to move to New Hampshire. for whatever reason. You know, if you succeed and you get to a point where the only thing that's illegal is, you know, murder and hurting somebody else, then maybe I'll fucking consider moving there. Until then, you know, fine. If you want to bring it up once in a while or once a show, but to go on and on about it and to insult people that just ain't down with it, it's fucked up. Maybe some people want to live where they live and fix their fucking community. Now, that doesn't mean they'll be able to do it, but I don't think that in New Hampshire that they'll really be able to do it neither. I don't think that the federal government is only going to let them go so far. And yes, it is good to have a bunch of activists around you. I understand. And all of that. But you can't compare, you know, and I know in Las Vegas, you know, we have the police that are out of control. But when you're talking about small towns, it's a lot different than when you're talking about a city or area that they police of over 2 million people. So there's a difference in that sense, too. I would rather live in Pahrump, to be honest, which is like 30,000 people, and it's in Nye County, and I think that's one of the freer cities in the or towns in the country. So, you know, I don't need to hear every second though that, well, I'm not for freedom or something, or I don't support freedom, or I'm not doing enough because I'm not fucking moving to New Hampshire. You know, the time I put into this fucking show, and no one's asked me to do it, so I don't feel that I'm owed anything like some other people do, or that anybody owes me money or time or anything. Nobody owes me anything. This is something I've decided to do, and this is my form of activism. It's also something I enjoy doing, and I think part of changing things is changing people's minds and getting the word out and letting people, exposing people to this information and these concepts. And that's why I focus a lot on the topics and concepts. So maybe people will start to think about them and understand them if I could get enough listeners. But looking at, you know, because I don't fucking do civil disobedience, so I can sit there and let the police arrest me when they come. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not something I would do. I believe in noncompliance, but I'm not going to, you know, if I'm not complying with something, I'm definitely not complying with the getting arrested. But that's something that, you know, who knows what I would do in that situation, because you know what the result of that could be. So that was something that was really bothering me, and I needed to get out there. And to all the people that are putting shows out there and taking the time, whether your show's horrible or not, if you really believe in it, just keep at it and you will get better. And put your whole heart into it. Dedicate yourself to it. Dedicate yourself to the craft of being a host or a co-host or a producer or whatever you're doing. And it takes a lot of time. And I think it's something that you're not going to get better at unless you keep doing it. It's not something that you can just read a book and then, okay, yeah, I'm great now. I think it's something that you have to continue to do. But you can't do it half-assed neither. People think it's easy to just get in front of a microphone and talk and, hey, you'll be great. Anybody can get in front of a microphone and talk, but that doesn't mean it's going to be entertaining or anyone's going to want to listen to you or it's going to be good. That's what takes the time, and that's what takes the just experience just doing it. And I don't want to discourage anybody. You know, I think I've gotten better. I don't think I was all that good in the beginning, and I think I've gotten better. Now, you know, people can disagree with me. That's fine. So for anybody out there that is just starting out, if you're dedicated to it and you want to put that time into it and be the best you can be, it's not like the Army, the best you can be or whatever. But I mean, that's how I look at it. I want to be the best I can be at what I'm doing. And I'm not at that point yet where I'm the best I can be. I think I can be a lot better, but I need more experience and I need to just keep doing it. And so I don't want to discourage any of those people. And I want to thank those people for at least doing something. So I'm not trying to insult them. I'm just saying basically that, and I should have said it this way, but it was more out of anger, that some of these, most of the shows, not every single one of them, but most of the shows on LRN are not ready for even that level, is what I'm saying. And I know you have to fill slots and you can't pay people, so what do? You know? But I think the majority of shows are not ready for that level yet. They need to maybe do what I'm doing and just, you know, sign up for. I mean, I think I got to the point where I'm a little advanced at this point, but I'm still not advanced enough. But, you know, you can sign up for one of the applications out there. I was going to say Spreaker, but with Spreaker, you need so much other stuff. Like I have all this equipment and whatnot, and I think that's more of an application for that. But you could do podcasts where all you really need is a microphone and you can download Audacity for free. So if you're not doing it live, there you go. It's pretty easy to do a podcast as far as what you need. So I hope that I didn't say anything that offended anybody other than Ian. And even with that, I'm sure, you know, he's been insulted enough that he doesn't give a fuck anyway. But with everybody else, I hope I didn't offend them or get them mad at me or you know, some people are sensitive and hurt their feelings in any way. Not that, you know, who am I? They might be like, well, that's just some fucking idiot anyway. And that's fine if people think that as well, because I'd rather them think that than hurt their feelings in some way. But I just think if you want to do this, if you want to do radio or YouTube or anything, I know you have other obligations, and as I do, and you have to work, and you may be married or you may have kids, or I have a fiance. Luckily, I don't have kids. I don't mean that as it's bad to have kids, but I want to wait until I get to a higher level when it comes to what I'm trying to do with internet radio. But I know that there's all of those things that can hold you back, but I just think your heart has to be into it to put some time aside that you can and do what you can to be the best. Well, the best you can be, because no matter what, there's always going to be somebody better. So I'm not out there to be better and compare myself to some other show and like I'm going to be better than Free Talk Live, or I'm going to be better than this. I'm not looking at it that way. I'm looking at it, how can I be the best that I can be based on whatever limited talent I have or non-limited talent or whatever. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that if you want to do this, and if you care about freedom and liberty, and you want to get to a point where Liberty Media is out there with everything else, where we're not shunned, where we're not, I mean, it's cool in a way that, okay, we're on the internet, we're more underground, but why shouldn't we have a channel or have shows that, you know, are syndicated or on Sirius Radio? I know, again, you have Free Talk Live, but that's pretty much it. And why shouldn't we have all of these things? And if we want that, then we have to work hard to get there, to put in the time, to not only put in the time as far as get the experience, because I think that's the most important thing, but even read a book about ways to get better and think of other ideas and different formats and different ways to entertain. Because at the same time, what it comes down to is, are you entertaining or not? Can you get these ideas across in a way that entertains people at the same time? Because if you can't entertain people, it doesn't fucking matter what you're saying. If you're boring, it doesn't matter what you're saying. So you need to be able to, it's not easy. You need to be able to be entertaining as well. And there's books out there that may help you in coming up with ideas. So you definitely need to put the experience part in, but there's nothing wrong with also looking at or looking for books that will help you as well. But don't fucking do this shit half-assed. If you want to just do this shit half-assed to be like, hey, yeah, I do a fucking show. Like there's so many people that do shows out there. So if you want to do it half-assed just to have a show, hey, we're going to do a show, and you don't prepare for it, that's the other thing. You don't put the time and the effort into it, then don't fucking do it. Seriously. Just don't bother. So that's all I have to say before like a vein pops out of my head or something. So I'm going to take a quick break. When we get back, I'm going to talk all about ISIS and the how the U.S. government are not only bigger terrorists than ISIS, but how I believe, and there is some evidence to back this up, that essentially the U.S. government runs ISIS. And, of course, I believe that they do, and may have even been involved in the attacks in France. Now, not involved meaning they actually did it, meaning the CIA or the U.S. government did it, but gave orders to their proxy army to do it. And I'm not the only one saying this neither. So it's not something that is only coming from me. And I'm not on my right thing here, or am I? I'm trying to find my list of, okay, they're at the top here. So I have some politicians that are, of course, talking about, on YouTube, Jeb Bush's commercial. He even has a fucking website, JebBushISISsomething.com. So speaking of Jeb Bush, we'll go to a clip of him. We'll start with that and play a couple other clips before we come back. Check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. If you'd like to call in, you can call in at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. You can also Skype into the show, Nonpartisan Liberty for All. It's one word, and it'd be better if you capitalized the first word of each word. So like capital N, capital P for partisan, just because I had an issue before when it wasn't typed exactly how. I don't know that you actually need to do that, but just in case. And then send a contact request and your your name, where you're calling from, and what you want to talk about. And if you call in, I would, if possible, text first. And I say if possible because if you're on a landline, you can't text from it. But if you are on a cell phone, if you could text first, same thing, your name, where you're calling from, or what you want to talk about. And then I won't have to screen the call. I can just go to you when I'm ready. So that would make things a lot easier. And I wrote before I go to the break, I wrote a thing on a post on my Facebook page today, which kind of led a little to some of the things I said, because I was thinking about it and I was just like, about people talking shit or people that are bad to you or whatever. Usually what I do is just, and I think this is the best thing to do, you just get them out of your life. And, that's it. That it's better to kind of just, hey, if somebody fucks you over, you remove them from your life and that's it. But when it comes to the fact that I have a radio show and there's things going on, and I mean, I'm not going to use it to talk about, well, hey, my neighbor talked shit about me today, or my friend, whatever. But if it comes to anything regarding people talking shit about me on the radio, or people that want to badmouth my show or question, activists question my commitment or what I do or the hours that I put in that they have no fucking idea, then yeah, I'm going to say something about it. And, I'm not going to spend a whole fucking show on it, but I'm not just going to sit there and, sometimes I guess I will. If it's whatever, I'll just blow it off. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I won't say something. So let that be a warning to all y'all motherfuckers now that are out there that, I'm in this to, like I said, be the best I can be and do that and take that to whatever level I can take that to. If I can take that to a level to have a network a couple years from now, an internet network that has quality shows on it, and that would be great. I'm not saying that I'll be able to do that, but I'm going to try. And I'm not going to let anybody get in the way of that. And I'm not going to let any fucking douchebag who obviously wouldn't know talent if it smacked them in the fucking face, stop me from getting myself out there. And other people that were promoting my show that aren't promoting it anymore because they feel like, I think how to phrase this, because they want to insult me or their friends want to insult me and I'm not going to take that shit, then fuck them too. Because that to me is whatever. And just keep, people can keep talking whatever the fuck they want to talk, and that's fine, and if they want to take it to a whole nother level, they don't want to do that. But, I usually just let things go, but if people want to be assholes about it and don't, then, fuck them. So anyway, we're going to go to a break and I'll be right back after this.
Terrorism, we have to maintain our values. And what he proposed, that's a proposition, is not a serious proposition at all. I've just laid out comprehensive plans to destroy ISIS, which would solve this problem, and to deal with the refugee challenges. And he's playing you guys like a fine Stradivarius violin. This is what he does. He's an expert at this. He's phenomenal at garnering attention.
That was Governor Jeb Bush slamming his competitor Donald Trump after the Republican frontrunner recently suggested banning all Muslims from entering the U.S. as a way to keep us safe from would-be terrorists. So what exactly is Governor Jeb Bush's plan to keep terrorism at bay? The former governor of Florida and Republican candidate for president, Jeb Bush, joins me now. Governor, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Megan.
So let me just start on the comment that you made there. He's playing all you guys like a violinist, basically what you said. I mean, do you believe this is an orchestrated campaign to get himself back into the headlines?
Oh, of course. He wants to, his tactic is to dominate the news so that other people's voice can't be heard. And it's very effective. I mean, he's a master at it. No one's ever come close to mastering that art form like he has.
Do you think he thinks of what is the most outlandish thing I could say?
Exactly.
And not a serious proposal, then?
Look, it's not a proposal. It's a sentiment. It's a way to fulfill people's deep anxiety and fear. People are legitimately scared. The President of the United States gives a speech on Sunday that was beyond uninspiring. The only animated part was gun control. When we're under attack, we're at war, at least by our enemy. They think we're at war. We're trying to, impose a law enforcement operation on top of them, and they're declared war on us. And so Trump is a master at this. But the simple fact is, he doesn't have a plan. He's not serious, and he's jeopardizing our ability to create a strategy to take out ISIS. The way to deal with this problem isn't to ban Muslims coming into our country. It's to destroy ISIS, plain and simple.
So what about the immigration issue when it comes to some Muslims then? Because now we know that this female terrorist got in. She was already radicalized. She gets in on a marriage visa. And now we find out that there's been an admission that some ISIS operatives are trying to use the Syrian refugee crisis to get into the United States.
Absolutely.
So that's why Americans are saying, wait, whoa, maybe we do need to pause.
Exactly. And I think we should pause. I don't think we should
on Syrian refugees.
Exactly. And we should also pause and make sure, like our visa waiver program, we have European countries, citizens who could be radicalized, that could have easy access to our country. We have to adapt our policies to the fact that we are at war. There's nothing wrong with that. But then to have a blanket indictment for 1 billion people, is that really a serious plan? All Indonesians are not allowed into our country. Canadians that happen to be Muslims aren't allowed into our country. That is ridiculous. And it sends such a chilling signal to our allies that we're no longer serious. How do you expect an ally, which we need to build an alliance. We can't do this ourselves, to take out ISIS. How are they going to do it if they believe that Donald Trump's going to be president? I don't think he will be, but it sends a pretty powerful signal. I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu today said that it's not a serious idea. There hasn't been a single leader in the world that suggests that's the right approach.
Well, it's amazing to see foreign leaders speaking out about the proposals of one presidential candidate. He's not even the president. He's a candidate. I want to move on from that because I want to ask you about your plan today. And you tell me whether I'm wrong. To me, it looks a lot like former President George W. Bush's plan when it comes to intelligence and surveillance to keep the country safe.
Yeah, absolutely. After 9/11, I think he built a infrastructure to protect us, and this president has reversed those things. Not just the Patriot Act.
What percentage of it would you say has been dismantled by this president?
Well, it's the tactics of intelligence gathering that has been restricted.
CIA black sites and the interrogations there.
That's definitely changed, and that might not be necessarily a bad thing. The times have changed, but
the NSA surveillance program.
That's changed, and then thirdly that people have civil liberties outside. Our terrorists have effectively a version of civil liberties, that you have to have compelling proof to be able to surveil outside the country. These are memorandums that have been designed by the White House on top of our intelligence community, on top of our military community, that puts hands tied behind their back.
But what about those who say, if the NSA program had been in place, it was in place out in California for years, while these two were out there harboring, their plans, and it didn't detect them?
Well, this is not that misunderstands what the metadata program is. It is a database from which you can identify the possibilities of attack. If you eliminate that, then you're never going to be able to get to the needle in the haystack. By eliminating the haystack, how are you going to find those cases? I think we need to use every tool. There's not any evidence that there's been a violation of civil liberties. Look, we're at war. These people want to destroy our way of life. We look out behind you and you see New York. Even in spite of the great law enforcement efforts and intelligence efforts that take place in this city, it is vulnerable to attack. And everybody knows it now. And this president hasn't led. And Hillary Clinton hasn't offered anything different. And Donald Trump is mirroring what they believe.
Governor Jeb Bush, thank you.
You bet.
And Secretary of Defense Ash Carter and Senator John McCain sparring on Capitol.
This video is the most recent one released since the Paris attacks. It promises more attacks on France, threatens President Obama, French President Francois Hollande, and even threatens to blow up the White House. It follows another video released yesterday vowing to attack New York City. That one shows Times Square, a bomb being made and a man zipping his jacket over a suicide belt. Authorities say that the video reaffirms the city remains a top terrorist target, but that there's no specific threat at this time. As for this latest video, Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Harridge has more from Washington. Catherine?
Well, thank you, Andrea. In the last hour, we have watched portions of the new ISIS propaganda video where two unidentified men threatened the U.S., saying France was first and Washington is next. Fox News is electing to show only one image from the tape and not broadcast the ISIS propaganda in its entirety. The key section is 90 seconds in length, and according to a translation provided by the Middle East Media Research Institute, the ISIS speaker says, quote, "We started with you," a reference to France, "and we shall finish with the false White House, which we shall render black with our fire, Allah willing. We shall blow it up like we blew up the false idols in this good land." This is the second tape in 24 hours threatening U.S. interests. The credibility is still being assessed at this hour. Last night's tape about New York City was seen by analysts as kind of a mashup, an old ISIS video from April recycled with some new images. But as you know, no change to the already high threat level in New York City itself. Meantime, two counterterrorism sources say the confirmed death of Abdul Hamid Abu Wad is a major advance for the investigation, but add they are operating on the premise that more senior suspects connected to the plotter at large. And they describe Abu Wad to Fox as kind of the Muhammad Atta of the Paris attacks, the tactical guy, the commander on the ground who identified and pulled together the operatives in the same way the lead hijacker kept the 9/11 teams on course once they arrived inside the U.S.
That's probably most likely that he's like the platoon sergeant or lieutenant for this cell, and that he was their leader on the ground. He was their support structure to make sure that they were all coordinated, they had the right timing and right equipment and material they would need to carry out these attacks.
Based on our contacts, they believe that the strategic planner, kind of the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed of this operation, is still at large. And if he was in Syria, has probably moved into Iraq, thinking that may be more safe haven for him at this time, Andrea.
All right. Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Harris, I want to go to you as well because this is also breaking today. CIA Director John Brennan coming out saying that at one point when George W. Bush was in office, there was about 700 ISIS terrorists. Now he says that has metastasized into about 4,000% more. 4,000% more. What do you think about this?
Well,
what are the headlines?
From what I'm reading, I'll tell you what I'm reading. And that is that part of that has happened because we, as America, didn't lead, and this is from generals and others, in terms of taking them out early on. So they weren't just building from within. They were able to recruit because it looked like there was not going to be an answer back violently from a government like ours. Our military violently on the ground anywhere. So they were able to recruit not just online, but in person. I mean, these training camps now are not just a few that are spotted and you might learn a few things. But these guys are carrying out, they may not be the level of sophistication that our special forces obviously would have, but they're able to elude those authorities in cities. What we learn now about this mastermind that was on the ground the whole time, we'll get into it in a little bit, in France the whole time, it's really interesting how these guys now can elude authorities, and they've been able to operate now for years.
And they're using our internet, Judge. I have Catherine's report right in my hand. The social media has really been integral in this. They're using hashtags. In fact, it says from the media office of the Islamic State. They have a media office, a press office, and they're using our internet. How much can we do, can the government do to put pressure on companies legally to shut this down?
Well, I mean, that's difficult. As you see with the whole Snowden effect, the pendulum swings the other way, and people say we want more liberty. We don't want the government looking over our shoulder. We don't want them reading our emails. We don't want any of that. And it's always a trade-off between personal liberties and security. If you look out your window in the middle of the night and there's somebody peering into your car, you call the police and tell them, hey, I think this guy's going to break into my car or steal my car. They'll come out and question them. They don't have anything to arrest them on, but they have the investigative abilities, and you want that investigative ability, because without it, you don't want the police going, sorry, let us know when he commits a crime. So there's always that trade-off. And right now, you've got all those encrypted software that these terrorists are using to communicate, and we don't have the ability to penetrate that software. So you get into that internal battle of, should we be able to penetrate encrypted software? And then people rise up and go, no, I don't want the government reading my personal emails.
Before I go to Sandra and Julie, there was a case here in New York, and a federal court ruled last month here in New York that Muslims can sue the NYPD for mosque surveillance. Now, as you know, they've done away with the mosque surveillance in New York. What do you think about this? I mean, this seems to be taking away a very important tool in law enforcement's hands that they're using to bust these guys.
Yeah, I think that's crazy. I think that if they have done something other than surveil, I mean, you can surveil anybody. People can surveil me for no reason if they feel it's going to be beneficial in an investigation. So surveillance in and of itself is not the problem. If they're going to be interfering with their rights, stopping them unnecessarily without even a reasonable suspicion of anything, then they should have a right at that point to say, wait a minute, you need at least a threshold of reasonable suspicion to do what's called a Terry stop, a Terry frisk. But just surveillance to say, we're going to tie your hands, then all you're saying is, hey, terrorists, hey, criminals, hey, whoever, do all your stuff at a mosque, because they are prohibited from, that's a safe space for criminals, let's say.
And Julie, the White House seems to believe that if we don't provoke the terrorists, they will not come after us. And we see today that video saying that they're going to blow up the White House, that's without U.S. boots on the ground. So it doesn't seem to really make a difference. They want to kill us no matter what.
Well, look, they're provoked. The concern for me is not so much the people in Syria who are there now. The concern for me, and we saw this in France, is these are people who are French nationals, Belgian nationals, who are already here. I don't know if they're in the United States. Our Muslim community is not as radicalized as the ones in Europe.
Yet?
For very good reason. France has a lot of work to do in terms of its relationship among the mainstream communities and their Muslim communities. Their Muslim communities are a lot more segregated than ours here in the United States. But the problem and the fear is it's easier to track people coming to and from Syria. It is much, much harder to track people who are American citizens or French citizens who are here already because they have the constitutional power, authority, obviously, as you all know, Judge, that a lot of people coming from abroad don't have. And so how do you get those people? How do you even track those people? That's the fear, because unlike al-Qaeda, these are people who are living here among us, and that, I think, is the biggest threat here.
Real quickly, it was the Middle East Media Research Institute that put out that information about their PR firm, if you will, the arm of the Islamic State, and just how specific. It's called Paris Before Rome, and now they're naming these videos. Several have come out since the Paris attack.
Well, apparently they also have
this one getting a lot of attention.
Apparently
they
also have a production company, because we're getting video after video. Not that we need that. We know they hate us.
All right.
In our fight against Islamic terrorism, we have to maintain our values. And what he proposed, that's a proposition, is not a serious.
And Secretary of Defense Ash Carter and Senator John McCain sparring on Capitol Hill, the two wrestling over America's fight against ISIS. And Secretary Carter confirming what we all already knew, but President Obama refused to admit.
Mr. Secretary, on the 1st of December, before the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Forbes asked General Dunford, quote, have we currently contained ISIL? General Dunford, we have not contained ISIL. Mr. Secretary, do you agree with General Dunford?
I agree with what General Dunford said, yes.
Former U.S. Army Kiowa warrior helicopter pilot in command, an Iraq and Afghanistan combat veteran, Amber Smith goes on the record. Nice to see you, Amber.
It's great to see you, too.
President Obama said right before the Paris attack, ISIS is not contained, or was not.
Look, I was happy to see Secretary Carter today say that ISIS is not contained. And I think he was sort of...
Or he said it was contained. I'm sorry, Obama said that it was contained.
Yeah, so I was happy to hear Secretary Carter disagree with Obama, because if he didn't, he would essentially be lying to Congress and lying to the American people. We all know ISIS isn't contained. And what I didn't like was the follow-up that Josh Earnest gave when he tried to say, oh, what they meant was that ISIS is tactically contained. ISIS is not tactically contained. That doesn't mean staging Iraqi security forces outside of Mosul and Ramadi waiting for something to happen. That's not tactical containment. That we wouldn't be talking about sending attack helicopters and increasing advisor assets and training and equipping and millions of more dollars into the fight.
Could we beat ISIS?
Oh, absolutely. But our strategy has got to be drastically changed and incredibly aggressive. We have to fight it on two fronts. One, the ideology globally, and two, we have to fight the enemy as it exists today. That means taking off the gloves, using all capacities of our military might, and going in and taking back Mosul, Ramadi, and their headquarters in Raqqa to disrupt their operations and financials in order to take the situation back over. So I think it's fairly naive to say that there's not going to be some form of U.S. military ground involvement to take this fight back.
How frustrated are you? You're a vet. You flew helicopters in combat, and now as we look what's going on over there, I can't imagine what it means to you.
No, it's so naive. What our military has to, it's very frustrating to see a commander-in-chief sort of lose every single game that we made. What our military has to offer today in terms of what we are up against with ISIS and fighting in Iraq and Syria today, we have over 14 years of experience of fighting this type of enemy, this type of insurgency-style warfare where they're attempting to blend in with the general population. We know what they look like, their tactic, techniques, and procedures. We know how to fight this enemy, but we can't do it if the commander-in-chief is not allowing us to do our job.
Frustration just you, or to everyone you talk to, all your former colleagues in the military, current and former?
Absolutely, current and former, because you want to know who the big loser here is? The United States military. When we are not fighting them now and today in the size that ISIS is right now, guess who's going to be fighting them tomorrow when someone sooner or later realizes that we're going to have to destroy them as they stand?
When you hear the term war fatigue, I mean, look, I'm not going to have to go. You flew helicopters in combat. You risked your life. I did. I mean, no matter what, I'm not going.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of when I hear that Americans are war-weary or they're tired of war. We need to wake up to the fact that our enemy is at war with us. So we can sit here and be passive and see more San Bernardino-style attacks, Paris attacks happen around the world, or we can wake up and acknowledge that this enemy is going to continue to come after us until we destroy them.
Amber, thank you very much, and I appreciate you serving in combat in that helicopter. It meant that the rest of us didn't have to. Anyway, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone.
ShireDude.com. You are listening to Nonpartisan Liberty for All Radio with your host, Dave Bourne. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
And we are back. And of course, I just get a text message from one of my haters, I guess, who I wasn't even fucking talking about. So whatever. I don't even know what to say about it, because people want to start shit with you, and then when you react to them, you're the bad person. So it's okay for them to start shit and act like fucking bitches. And then when you actually, and I didn't even say anything about this person or mention their name, and I wasn't talking about them in the last segment. I was talking about Ian, who I said I was talking about Ian in LRN. But now this person, who I'm still not going to name, wants to send me a message and call me a motherfucker and says that they're going to go and, talk all this shit about me and why people left, which they don't know nothing about that, because besides maybe a certain person, the people that I've had on, that the group that I really liked, actually, one is still gonna be part of the show, but has all this fucking shit going on in their life. One of them left for work reasons, and the other one left for a better opportunity. And they were, in that case with Ellen, I gave Ellen every opportunity always to, get out of stuff. There was something that happened that other people don't even fucking know about, where I felt like she didn't really want to be on the show. And essentially, she was the one who made it clear that she wanted to be on the show. So people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And go talk all the fucking shit you want, because you don't know anything anyway. And really, to waste my time addressing them is a waste of time for the show. To actually talk about what Ian's doing is different, because that actually affects the media when it comes to Liberty Media. And that's who I was talking about, and I was talking about LRN. And I think that's important, because it does affect Liberty Media, and it does affect what's going on with it. So to address that, I think is worth my time. To sit here and get into some argument with somebody who, is a fucking nut and wants to talk shit and, yell at me and call me names and stuff like that is pointless. So, whatever, go and talk whatever shit you want and have a nice life. And then, if anybody actually, and I'm only going to say this fucking once, if anybody actually wants to do something where they want to get someone to try to attack me or something like that, I carry a gun for a fucking reason. So as far as people, wanting to attack me physically for what I say on my show, if people actually try to do it, go ahead and fucking try to do it. And then I guess we'll see what happens there. And that's only in self-defense. If people want to call me names, I'll walk away. But if people want to, and I'm not talking about the person talking shit because they happen to be a female, but saying that, they would go to other people and talk shit and make up lies or something like that to have them do something. I believe in self-defense, and I will defend myself. And that's bottom line. And I'm kind of getting threats, not threats of violence, but I am getting threats. So if I get any threats of violence, I'm not going to do anything. But when somebody comes, if somebody comes after me or tries to attack me, I will defend myself. But anyway, this is a waste of fucking time talking about this bullshit. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is the connection between U.S. and ISIS and who the real terrorists are. And, well, I think that's a bad analogy to say who are the real terrorists, because obviously ISIS are terrorists. Now, whether they're terrorists connected to the U.S. or taking orders from them, that's a whole nother issue. But if you look at the amount of people that have been killed, and I'm talking about innocent people, I'm not talking about what they call collateral damage. I'm not talking about the actual wars prior to World War II, if you look at even Vietnam, they were killing innocent people. Korea, I honestly don't know enough about to say, but Korea was almost a pointless war where the border ended up never changing. It went forward, it went back, it ended up at the same point where it was originally. So when it comes down to it, I don't have a number of the U.S. killed this amount of people, and we wouldn't really know anyway, because I'm sure there were bombings that were carried out by terrorist groups per the United States, or maybe not groups, but a terrorist. I mean, think about that. There's so many things that I think people forget about or don't think about or is not really on their radar. But you could have the CIA and, they operate all over the world, especially in the Middle East. You could have them actually give whatever they needed to a terrorist to conduct a terrorist attack. And why wouldn't they do that if it benefited them? And most likely they would. I mean, they have all these assets. Most of them are to get information, at least. That's how it should be if they are to exist at all, which I don't believe that they should exist, period. But if they are to exist at all, they should exist. It should be to gather information. If you've ever watched the show Homeland, and I don't know how much of that is true and how much of it is not, it's funny how Hollywood seems to know all these things and even predict things. And we've talked about that. I did a show about movies and all of these things happening in movies that essentially happened years later. And the one I always go to is that Long Kiss Goodnight. And I want to get the clip from the movie where, and I wonder if I could get it on YouTube. I'll try during the break, where they actually say that they need I think it's a congressman who specifically says, I need to do something big, where he even says like 3,000 people die. It's kind of surreal because the movie came out, I believe, in 96. And I remember seeing it actually at the theater. And then you have 5 years later, the World Trade Center bombing. And that's almost exactly from what I remember from the movie they were talking about. And that was the whole kind of point of the movie, meaning that they were trying to find out what she knew about their plan. And then she went after them. And, of course, she kills all the bad guys. And I guess nothing blows up until later when other people are in charge and they do the same thing. Because I guess they all had the same plan there. So, but you could point to a lot of other movies, including even the last Star Wars movie, where they essentially labeled the Jedi's terrorists and the Emperor had to take over. And I referred to this in one of the shows I did, actually, with a nice picture of the emperor in it, where he's nice and, I don't know, wrinkled or whatever. It's weird. I don't know if those are like supposed to be actual like wrinkles or like his face is just, I don't know. Anyway, the new Star Wars movie is coming out in about 8 days, I believe. So I'm sure people are excited about that, I guess. As a kid, I did have a lot of Star Wars dolls, and I wish I still had them. I don't know, you call them dolls, they're action figures, and wish I still had them. Anyway, regarding ISIS and the connection to the U.S., I mean, first of all, if you go back to Al Qaeda, and I should get this clip from Obama, but if you go back to Al Qaeda, that came out of, and this is a non-disputed fact, which I've brought up a whole bunch of times, that in the Afghan war between Russia and Afghanistan, in the war between them, the U.S. supported Afghanistan, of course, because of the Cold War with Russia, and the person they dealt with was Osama bin Laden, which essentially was a CIA asset. And they gave him all these weapons and all of this money and all of this shit. So when you look at that and you look at how Al Qaeda essentially came out of that, and then I believe it was about a year ago where, and here I'll play the clip because I think it's short, where there's one that's better, that's actually a mix. But this one, I think this is a montage, yeah. So here's a montage of Obama, and you also get that other fucking moron, the vice president, talking about how they decimated Al Qaeda. And this was like at the most a year and a half ago, but it was like a year before ISIS came around, if that. So the times between them talking about Al Qaeda being decimated and ISIS showing up wasn't that far of a span of time. So let me play this real quick. I've played this before, but for the people who haven't heard it, and it goes to a whole bunch of different statements. It's a montage of clips from mostly Obama, but Biden, fucking Biden, he's in there and he just sounds like a moron.
Everything but 1/10 of 1%.
Let me actually, sorry about that. I didn't have that turned up before it started. So let me start that again.
By the way, doesn't decimate mean you destroy everything but 1/10 of 1% or 10%? Decimate?
I think maybe. I'm not really sure about the technical definition.
Well, can you get back to me on that while we roll to this tape of people talking about Al Qaeda being decimated?
There should be no doubt. Today, America is stronger, and Al Qaeda is on the path to defeat. We've decimated Al Qaeda's leadership.
Al Qaeda is on the path to defeat, and bin Laden is dead.
We've decimated Al Qaeda Central. We have eliminated Osama bin Laden.
Al Qaeda is much weaker than it was when I came into office.
Osama bin Laden is dead, and General Motors is alive.
He sounds really fucking creepy. And that's why I had mentioned, and it's not over yet, but Joe Biden. I'm going to go back a couple of seconds there where he says, Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. And I'm a fucking nut. He sounds like a serial killer.
Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive.
The war in Afghanistan is coming to a close, Al-Qaeda is on the path to defeat. Osama bin Laden is dead. Today, the core of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan is on the path to defeat. Their remaining operatives spend more time thinking about their own safety than plotting against us.
So you have that going on and all those things being said. And of course, they were said at different dates. But it was about a year, because I remember when I played it before, it was something like a year before Al-Qaeda came into the mix. I mean, Al-Qaeda, from what I remember, I believe either end of 2014 or beginning of 2015. It's even hard to go back and remember the time span, especially with it. Time seems to go by so fast, and there's so many things that are happening, and so it's hard to kind of look at the path there of when this happened. But I know between the time that they were going out bragging about the fact that, well, Al-Qaeda's on the run, Al-Qaeda's decimated, Osama bin Laden's dead. There were some conspiracy theories about that. I don't know. I don't really care, because why waste my time researching when did Osama bin Laden die? It's what is that going to do? Well, the government lied. Well, the government lies all the time. So really, what's the fucking difference? So they say all that, and then you all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it really was out of nowhere, you hear about, oh, there's this group. I think at the time they were ISIL. But it might have even been because there was the Islamic State. I don't remember them calling them though, but I remember ISIL, which Obama still uses, and there was ISI. I think there was an ISI. I don't know what that stood for, Islamic State something, but they all of a sudden came out of nowhere. Now, remember before that the U.S. government was also arming, and I'm going to get into some shit that I don't think people know, and these are facts that I'm going to get into, at least some of them. But they came out of nowhere, and before that, you had the whole thing where John McCain was saying how they should arm the Syrian rebels, because you had a civil war going on in Syria for about, at the time, I think it was a couple years. However, what business is that of the United States government? Now, the average person who has common sense would say none. However, there are a lot of people that think, well, we got to make the world safe for democracy, and that's right. We got to make the world safe for democracy, and we got to go into Syria. We got to cleanse that place. We got to get rid of Assad. We got to make people free, like we did in Libya and Iraq. And I don't know, there was another place that they fucked up too. But on the surface, they would say, we want to stop, and this is what they did say, that we want to stop the deaths of all of these people, and Assad's a dictator and he's murdering people. So if you remember, or even if you don't remember, what had happened. And I think it was the summer of, I remember it during the summer. It might have been 2013, because I think 2014, the summer of 2014 is, that was not far enough away, because this has been going on for a while. Although to me, it does seem like it was the summer of 2014, but I believe it was the summer of 2013. Either way, they blame Assad for using chemical weapons. Now it comes out later. So Obama says a year to the day. Like, that's not coincidence. So he says a year before that if Syria uses chemical weapons, that they will do something. I don't think those were exact words. If Syria uses chemical weapons, we will do something. Like, that's not his exact words, but it was something to the effect that there will be some kind of reaction to that. There will be some kind of strike, or something will happen out of that. What that will be is a whole nother thing. So what they did, and pay attention to this, because this could possibly happen here from the U.S. government. Sorry, I had to cough there. And what reminds me of it is watching Homeland, and I watch it to see kind of what their, I don't think it's a show that promotes freedom, but to get their take. And also, I think you can learn things from it. Not that necessarily everything in it is true, but it gets you thinking about possible things that they would and could do. So I think there's a benefit in watching that show. But in Homeland recently, they have some terrorists that have sarin gas. And I guess it just makes you stuff come out of every orifice and you die. It's not a good way to die, essentially. Not that there's, a good way to die, but from what I understand, it's a painful, you don't die right away, and it's a painful way to die. So I believe that was the same chemical gas they were talking about. It might have been mustard gas. And I think mustard gas, the only difference is it's fucking yellow, like the color of mustard. I'm not an expert in any of these gases. The only reason that I bring this up is because the last week's episode of Homeland, they have actually used the gas on somebody, and they're planning on using it on a city. So I started thinking about that and how that is a way to scare the fuck out of the American people. And that's exactly what I was thinking when I was watching it, that are they doing this on purpose also to scare people that the terrorists could, or the terrorists, like, such a, like the government or the non-specific, but terrorists could use a type of chemical weapon, because that, on one side of it, it's like it's so easy to combat, right? Because if you have a fucking gas mask, you're fine, as far as I know. Now, I know there's stuff that can like burn your skin and shit, and that shit is not good at all. Not that any gas is good, but the gas that is just harms you by going into your lungs, there's a difference between that and gas that will like burn your skin and shit. So anyway, it just made me think of that. And I had planned on getting a gas mask anyway, but they had blamed Assad, of course, and they were ready to attack. And then I think there were so many people that were against it. Obama started thinking about not that he's going to get in any trouble, or not that he can't do it, just that, well, his legacy, and okay, I'll go through Congress if we do this. And then later it's, oh, well, it was the rebels that were being supported by the U.S. government. As I had mentioned, McCain just said, hey, I'm going to go hang out with them and give them weapons. So some of these people are some of the people that ended up part of ISIS. I mean, ISIS is a lot of former Al-Qaeda, and it's a lot of it's just changing the name. But the other thing is, I had watched this video where I think it was from PBS, where they had a journalist in with ISIS in Afghanistan. I didn't even know ISIS was in Afghanistan, to be honest. So they're fighting with the Taliban, but at the same time, the Taliban and ISIS are fighting with the government. So they have a common enemy, but they're still at war. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the fact that they're of different sex, meaning not sex, S-E-X, sex, S-E-C-T, or they're, because ISIS, I don't even know what I mean, ISIS is Sunni or Shiite or whatever. And I think what it comes down to, and this is speculation, is that ISIS is a organization that was just put together to get soldiers, that they don't care about the Muslim fucking principles, most of them. And that's not what it's about. So the one thing I was going to add that people probably don't know is that they pay these fighters. And there was an interview with one of the fighters in Afghanistan as to why he joined ISIS. And he said, the money. They pay me more money. So somebody is funding ISIS, and you think about that ISIS is paying money. And I never really thought of a terrorist organization paying money. Like when I thought about Al-Qaeda, I didn't think that Al-Qaeda got a salary for being part of a terrorist organization, that they just took care of whatever. They had a base and they had food there and stuff like that. And maybe the higher ups would get some money and buy stuff for people or whatnot. And their clothes, I don't know that they're expensive. It looks like they're wearing the long whatever they wear. So I always thought of it that way. I had never thought of the fact of a terrorist organization getting paid, of course, until I started thinking of ISIS. And of course, that makes sense, that they're mercenaries. Now, why would ISIS be going out recruiting people by paying them? Now think of that. You have all the shit you hear in the media. And of course, I've never heard that on any government media, although PBS kind of is, but I mean, it's like, who watches PBS? And they're recruiting people like a job. And this is where it gets more in line with what I was talking about, where I believe that ISIS is a proxy army. Now, based on that, you had, I forget who it was, but you had a congressman or somebody else talking about supporting the Kurds and having them go and do the job, or another organization. Of course, even with McCain, you had them saying we'll support the Syrian rebels to go do the job. So essentially, they've already talked about having organizations that are essentially terrorists doing the job for them, going out and taking care of what they need them to take care of. So we know that they're capable of doing that. That it's not something that the U.S. government wouldn't do, because they've done it, and they've done it in the case of the Syrian rebels, which was a big mistake, and they talked about doing it. Then you have, of course, all the weapons that, they found them. They found abandoned U.S. weapons that the Iraqi army had, which is a bunch of bullshit. There has been, and this is speculation, but there has been talk that they have been dropping off tanks and weapons and all of these things to ISIS. So that is out there as well. So all of the ones that I saw in this video that happened to be in Afghanistan, they all use AK-47s. I talked about AK-47s yesterday. It's like the universal fucking gun. And we'll get into the other thing they're doing as well for future generations. So the way it seems like to me is the majority of ISIS is not part of ISIS because they believe that it's part of Islam to do what ISIS is doing. There may be a percentage. They may recruit differently in different areas. But they're also paying people. So they're, if they're paying some people, I got to think they're paying all people. And I think I saw another video where they talked about paying them too. That was outside of Afghanistan. But this was actually an interview with an actual ISIS fighter. And he talked like, he doesn't give a fuck about ISIS and he doesn't know about this, but they pay more and I have to support my family. That's what he said. So you take from that the fact that ISIS has formed its own army that's backed somehow financially by someone. Now, there were rumors that Turkey is selling ISIS oil, the oil that they got from Iraq, which I don't know how, if the U.S. didn't want to, they could stop that. I think the whole thing is they don't want to stop that because then they don't have to fund ISIS as much. So as opposed to having to give them more money, they let them take over some of the oil in Iraq. And I don't know if they still have control of that. But I know at some point that supposedly Turkey was selling and that was, more speculation as well, but it was reported that Turkey was selling their oil, most likely. So that's where they were getting their money. However, I'm sure they're also getting money from the U.S. government as well as supplies. So why would they create ISIS in the first place? I mean, it's pretty simple because they've already told us. They've talked about the Syrian army and the Kurds and other people fighting for them. And if you notice with this, Obama, with all his bombings and all his troops on the ground in different places, including Libya, from what I recall, and all of these things, he does not want troops on the ground in this situation. Well, why? Well, if there's troops on the ground, they're also going to kill ISIS fighters, which is not what they want. They want ISIS to overthrow Syria. So it's kind of going backwards to what your goal is. So your goal being, okay, we want Assad out of Syria. Now, why, I think, goes to, one, there were rumors of the pipeline, building a pipeline from Russia to Syria to get off of OPEC oil. And also, of course, they wouldn't use the U.S. dollar. Right now, all OPEC oil goes through SWIFT, and they have to exchange the oil or the U.S. dollars for, they have to they have to exchange their currency for U.S. dollars to buy oil from OPEC, which increases the value of the dollar. It also pushes inflation off on the rest of the world and controls the inflation here to an extent. But the prices here are ridiculously high anyway. So I don't think they're doing a good job of it. And then, of course, you have the Federal Reserve still printing all the money they're printing and have the interest rates at zero. But that's the real reason they want Assad out, along with why they wanted other people out as well, because they being the U.S. government, need the U.S. dollar to remain the reserve currency, and they need people buying oil from OPEC and U.S. dollars. Otherwise, the dollar collapses, the economy probably collapses, and depending on who you talk to, the level of whatever you'd like to call it, riots or just craziness in the streets or whatever. There's a lot of speculation on that, but I talked to Ken Shorgen, who's on he's going to be on every Wednesday now, but next week he's going to be on Tuesday because Wednesday I have something I got to do. But he originally said it would be, total craziness, total like a third world country type scenario. Now, I think that's the extreme, but who knows? I mean, people think because, it's America, it can't happen here, but you look at all these other countries that it has happened in. So who knows? But that's why they want to get rid of Assad no matter what. And it's obvious because they've been trying to do it for years now. They did the chemical weapons thing. They supported the Syrian army. Why would they want to even get involved in the first place if it's a civil war? And they're basing it off of, first of all, Assad is more secular than an Islamist as far as how he rules. Now, I'm not saying he's a great guy. Obviously, he's done bad things, but he's claiming that once this is over, they will have free elections. Now, whether that will happen or not, I don't know. But the people that are fighting against them, just like in these other countries, like if you look at Gaddafi, it was the same thing. He was more opening up to the West. He was investing in Africa, as opposed to pushing all these Islamic laws on people. The rebels are the ones that want Sharia law or Islamic law to be, they want church and state together. So why would you, either way, if Assad's such a bad dictator, don't support him neither, but don't get involved either way. But an easy way to get what you want and not have to do anything, not have to deal with the press as to why the military's there and all of these things, is to create your own proxy army made up of Muslims, say that they're their own group that they started, say that they are out there because they want to take over the world and have a caliphate and all of this shit. And some of them, I think, do. And I was thinking, the ones more at the bottom. But then more and more, if they're getting paid too, I mean, how many of these people are actual real jihadists? Probably a lower percentage than we would think. Because if they're in it for the money, I mean, obviously you have whoever's at the top, and this is total speculation. Whoever's at the top, I would say, would be reporting to the CIA or a government agency. And they're, of course, in it for the money or control or whatever. Maybe they want to control part of Syria or Iraq or one of these countries as well, along with money. So you have those people. Then you kind of have people throughout the ranks, but they're also, essentially hiring people that are saying, okay, we'll fight for you. I mean, I'm sure there's people that are fighting for ISIS that aren't even Muslims. Maybe they just look Muslim and they're doing it for the money. Now, it was $700, I'm thinking a month, because I remember not being at that much money. I mean, $700 a week, that's, especially if that's after taxes, that's not bad. But I believe that was per month, and over there, I guess that's pretty good. I don't know. You can buy a nice cave over in Afghanistan. So they are paying these people, which again, why would they do and how would they support that? And I believe it's the U.S. government who let them control the oil in Iraq, if they're still even controlling it, and is funding them along possibly with MI6 and England and maybe other European countries as well. So that's why I think, and I talked about this, that if France is bombing ISIS, that how much or little is France even part of this? And did the U.S. do it because France is starting to start a relationship with Russia? And maybe the U.S. said, look, you're going to stay with us and NATO, even though they don't even need NATO anymore. And if they ever needed it in the first place. And if you don't, we have an army called ISIS that will conduct fucking terrorist attacks on you. So I believe what happened, and again, this is total speculation, had something to do either with one of two things. Now, when Ken Shorgen was on the last time, our expert in geopolitics and the economy, he said that France's president, his approval rating was at about 11%. And it went up to, I don't know what it went up to, but he said he'll probably end up winning the election now because of this. So the other side of it could be, can you know, if the U.S. is running ISIS, let's have ISIS conduct a terrorist attack. Or maybe it wasn't even ISIS. Maybe it was whatever France's secret agency is. Because don't forget the fact that the U.S. gathers all this fucking data, and then we're supposed to think that they don't know what's going on, and they do it for other countries as well. Of course they do. If something happens, it's because they wanted it to. So even with these two people in California, and they said they investigated them before. That's why I think in that scenario, that's another one of the FBI type things where the FBI finds usually people that aren't too smart on the internet that are talking about jihad, gives them all the equipment, and then when they press the button, it just doesn't explode, and then they can say, look, we stopped a terrorist attack. And that's fact. That's happened so many damn times, probably more than we even know of. Judge Napolitano a couple years ago went through it, and it was like 18 of 20 or something that he had information on just from articles and stuff like that. So they could have been in that situation. And what makes me think that is the pipe bombs. Because, well, one, they didn't use them, but the fact that they made pipe bombs and being in the U.S. and the guy being from the U.S., being born here and everything, and making pipe bombs, it just, I don't know, something in it makes me think that the FBI helped them make pipe bombs. And they didn't go into the details of the bombs. The other thing could be because they talked about that the coworkers threw a baby shower. Because I heard somebody say on the radio that nobody really knew him, or what about the, baby? No one came to see the baby. And in an article I had read that they had thrown them a baby shower. So you're friends with these people, they throw you a baby shower, and then you're just going to kill them? I mean, maybe they killed only certain people. I don't know. Why wouldn't they have attacked someplace else? Why did they attack their work? I mean, they could have gone into, you think about it, they could have gone into any restaurant and killed just as many people, if not more. So why did they go to work? Did they have a certain amount of people that they just really didn't like that much? And the investigation into that seemed pretty quick to say, well, there was nobody else involved. Well, now there's the neighbor, and the neighbor supposedly is giving up all of this information. He's cooperating totally with the FBI. This is what they're saying. I don't know if I believe that. Maybe they're torturing him, and he was involved. Now they're saying that they had plots from like 2010 and 2011. They just didn't carry them out, and that he was the one who bought the weapons. But if the guy, this makes no sense neither, because if the guy who actually did it had no record, they're saying, and these weapons were legal to buy in California, which I don't believe they are. I don't know. Maybe he got them in another state. At least they're not with certain things where it's harder to reload and you can't have magazines over like 10 rounds. So if they were bought in California, they had restrictions on them unless he had bought them, 10 years ago or something. But I thought about that as well. Well, why didn't the guy just buy them himself? Why did he need the friend to buy them? And that doesn't make any sense. So technically, for the people that did it, no, they weren't bought legally. They were bought and given to them. So I'm a bit still confused on that whole thing. But they did bring him in, and what they're reporting, and again, this is just what they're reporting, and I don't know if I have I do. Okay. I didn't remember if I had this from an actual video or from a article. So let me find this video and I will play it. It's hard to know from the names here which video is which. I know from the IDs there, not IDs, but the YouTube has the, okay, here it is, the neighbor. So we'll play this and a couple other clips and we will be right back. NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com. If you'd like to call in, you can Skype in at Nonpartisan Liberty for All, one word. Send a contact request, your name and what you want to talk about. And if you want to call in, 702-470-7664, 702-470-7664, and try to text first, and then I can just answer it and bring you on the air. Now I lost where the, there it is. So this is, I guess, the neighbor, the report about the neighbor. And we'll play a couple other clips as well and then be right back. NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com.
Good afternoon, everyone. We lead with some breaking news in the investigation into the California terrorist attack at the holiday office party last week. U.S. officials telling CNN that the neighbor who gave the terrorist Saeed Rizwan Farouk 2 AR-15 rifles used in last week's attack is, in fact, the same person, the accomplice, who helped Rizwan Farouk in another attack plot back in 2012. Let's get right to CNN Justice correspondent Pamela Brown and Justice reporter Evan Perez, who are breaking the story. Pamela, let's start with you. What are your sources telling you?
Well, we reported last night for the first time about this 2012 plot, Jake, and now we can say that the other person involved with that plot with Saeed Farouk was, in fact, Enrique Marquez, a longtime friend and former neighbor of Farouk, and they were plotting this back in 2011, 2012. Apparently, according to an interview that he did with the FBI, they had scoped out a target, and they were going to launch an attack, but because of some other unrelated terror arrests in that area, they got spooked and aborted their plans. Also, Enrique Marquez, who has waived his Miranda rights, has been cooperating with the FBI, saying that he was radicalized with Farouk back in 2011, which gives some sense of a timeline as far as radicalization for the San Bernardino attack. We should point out, though he did give those rifles to Farouk, we don't know whether he was aware of the plot, even though those guns were used. But he did buy those rifles around the time of this alleged plot that officials are still trying to corroborate.
This is significant for so many reasons, Evan, but one of them is it certainly undermines the idea that this radicalization took place just recently. This goes back all the way to 2011.
Right, exactly, and it does really paint a picture of what Farouk was up to by the time he goes and tries to find a wife overseas. Was he shopping essentially for a jihadi bride? That's one of the things that the FBI is pursuing as part of this investigation. And also, what the FBI is getting all of this information. I mean, Marquez is just talking to the FBI and just giving them everything they want, but they have yet to do the work to corroborate any of this. They don't know whether he is simply trying to draw attention away from any other information he may have on the San Bernardino plot that took place last week. What he may be doing is simply giving them a lot of information. Keep in mind, if this 2012 plot does exist, he can't be charged because it didn't actually take place.
Yeah, and how do you verify it?
Right, how do you verify?
So the investigators first learn about Enrique Marquez because he was the one that supplied the weapons, the semi-automatic rifles, to the shooters. And apparently, after the attack, he checked himself into a hospital of some sort?
That's right. So right after the attack, he checked himself into a mental health facility. We don't really know the circumstances surrounding that. But following that point, we know that he was talking to the FBI starting a few days ago and has been continuously talking to the FBI. He has not been charged, we want to point out, Jake. So you know,
Right.
Even though investigators are trying to figure out, what did he know anything about the San Bernardino attack? Was he involved in some way?
And he has told them that he bought these two rifles that were used in the attack, Jake. He bought them for Farouk. Now, part of the question there is why? Farouk was clean enough to be able to pass a background check. He had 3 other guns. So the question that the investigators now are pursuing is why was that? Was Farouk simply trying to cover his tracks, trying to make sure he didn't draw any of the attention? Again, plotting this attack as far back as then.
And Pamela, let me ask you about the mother, Sayed Razwan Farouk's mother, who lived in the house with the terrorist couple while they were stockpiling ammunition to a degree, while they were building bombs, a bomb lab in the garage. What are investigators saying about her?
And we also know that part of the loan that he got just a couple weeks before the attack, this $28,500, around half of that, we're told from sources, was handed to his mother. Now, we don't know if she was aware of why she was getting that money, because we know that he moved in with his wife to her home, so perhaps it was to pay for rent or perhaps something more sinister. We don't know that, but of course investigators want to figure out, what did she know? Was she complicit in some way? But at this point, we're being told that she's not exactly a person of interest or more focused right.
Well, let's now talk to political journalist and author Gerard O'Coleman, who joins us from Paris this evening. Thanks very much for joining us again on RT International. You're in the French capital. What's the mood and atmosphere in the city right now?
We're being told that there's a state of war and a state of emergency. We've had this before. We had this in January, and for several weeks we had non-stop sirens and non-stop chatter on the radio about the threat from radical Islam and terrorist groups and so on. And so we're having a kind of a replay of that, but it has been, I think, accentuated, and we're going to have an intensification of the media campaign, which is essentially a propaganda campaign to make people in France fear Muslims. We need to be clear about the origin of the war on terror. The war on terror is, I quote, orchestrated from abroad. These are the words François Hollande used to describe this terrorist attack. Well, the attacks that have been continuing to destroy Syria, to massacre its population, have also been orchestrated from abroad. They were orchestrated by NATO, and they've been carrying these attacks out against the civilian population of Syria for 4 years now. And this is a terrorist campaign that is also orchestrated from abroad. And people in Europe need to understand that there is a war that is becoming global, that is being waged against civilian populations in particular. It is a form of neo-imperialism and neo-colonialism which aims to divide and conquer European and Middle Eastern and African and the world's population, for that matter, and to make them submit to a global order that does not serve the interests of most of the people on this planet, but that does serve the interests of a very few ruling elite, a very small, tiny, and particularly tyrannical ruling elite. There is no war on terror. There is a war that is being waged using proxy groups, terrorist proxy groups, and they are being used against nation states who are resisting U.S. and Israeli hegemony, and they are also being used as a means of disciplining the workforces in Europe. In a period of mass unemployment and austerity, you now have terrorist attacks being committed by terrorists funded, armed and trained by Western intelligence agencies. There is no such thing as ISIS. ISIS is a creation of the United States. We know that from official sources of the U.S. military themselves. Declassified documents from the Defense Intelligence Agency have confirmed that. And the French government is now attempting to drum up support for more military intervention in Syria. And what they want to do is they want to get in on the game. The game is almost lost. The Russians have routed much of the Islamic State. You now have Islamic State militants coming into Europe disguised as refugees. That will destabilize Central Europe, and the French government wants to get in on the game in Syria and prop up those so-called moderate rebels. There are no moderate rebels, of course, in Syria. There are Al-Qaeda and ISIS militants, terrorists who have been beheading people, eviscerating people, absolutely creating chaos and genocide right across the region, and this does not serve the Syrian people or anyone other than the Western corporate elites and their geopolitical interests.
What do you expect France to do now in the light not only of Friday's terrorism, but 10 months on from Charlie Hebdo? It's not going to ease up on what it's doing, is it?
No. Much depends on how the French public will react. We are being bombarded now with a media propaganda campaign. There's this non-stop talk where we're told not to go out in the street. We're supposed to be fearful and keep quiet and so on. I think there is going to be a campaign against dissidents in France. They're very worried about the new media that has emerged in recent years, and they are very worried about the alternative media. So I think you will see, we saw this actually after the attacks in January, you will see a conflation of terrorism and dissidents. So one of the tools which the mass media uses to discredit any kind of rational questioning of the established order, and particularly the war on terrorism, is to deride those who would question the war on terrorism as conspiracy theorists. And I think you're going to see a crackdown on so-called conspiracy theorists and websites that actually publish rational and honest analysis of what is happening. So you're going to see more of that type of intellectual terrorism, which is already at a boiling point in France. I mean, it's got to the point now where you have professors in universities who are being intimidated. You have school teachers who are basically being fired for even suggesting that there may be a link between French imperialism and terrorism. There was one case recently, for example, of a school teacher who almost lost his job when he suggested there might be a link between French foreign policy and terrorism. So we are going through a period of deep intellectual terrorism. And of course, these random terrorist acts, which are a form of low-intensity civil war. I think that the current crisis, the refugee crisis, which is really a form of coercive engineered migration, because it could have easily have been prevented, this form of coercive engineered migration is going to make this a lot worse, and it is going to create the conditions of civil war. It is a natural consequence, of course, of globalization, of financial capitalism. This is essentially what it leads to. I mean, it leads to a breakdown of society. And the only way in which they can kind of keep everybody down is by a policy of divide and conquer. So you're going to see a situation where you've got very much a Wahhabized working class in France. They're being Wahhabized by the allies of the French political elite, the Saudis and the Qataris. They're building Wahhabite mosques all over the place. And that is going to Wahhabize the youth, and they're going to be then used as pawns, if you like, in much bigger geopolitical wars, proxy wars against Russia, proxy wars against Iran in the Middle East, and so on. And that is going to create massive social unrest. It's going to divide working people against each other. And the only people who are going to actually benefit from this are the war contractors, the military-industrial media intelligence complex. So in whatever way you look at this, I don't know who exactly committed this attack and this atrocity, but the real people who are responsible, whether directly or indirectly or consciously or unconsciously, is the French government, because they have been complicit in terrorism in the Middle East and all over Africa. And that needs to be understood. And if we don't understand that, this is going to continue and it's going to deteriorate. We will find ourselves in a situation under military law, martial law, if this continues. So it really needs to be analysed and understood.
Can I pick you up on the issue of migrants and refugees? Because one of the terrorists appears to have been a French citizen, another a recent migrant to the country. What do you think this will do to France's policies towards the migrant crisis?
Well, I think there is sufficient evidence to suggest strongly, in fact, that the current crisis, I mean, the migration crisis is something that is ongoing, and there are different waves. You've got different waves coming up from Libya, you've got the ones coming up from Syria and up through the Balkans. But the current kind of refugee crisis, as it were, is what I would refer to as coercive engineered migration. This is a term used by Kelly Greenhill, a US academic, who wrote an interesting book on this, whereby she shows that migration can be used as a tool by one state to destabilize another state. In this case, it's definitely being used by the United States and Turkey to destabilize the Balkans, Mitteleuropa, which would be Hungary, and of course Germany. And the geostrategic reasons of this are basically go back to classical geopolitics, which is Halford Mackinder's theory of dividing the world island. That is to say, you divide the Eurasian Peninsula from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. You create an intermarium there so that you prevent German and Russian unity. And that is why Germany essentially is being kind of overrun with people who are themselves victims of globalization, but they are now being instrumentalized and used as weapons of globalization. And this is one of the key contemporary strategies of US imperialism. You use the consequences of globalization as further tools to further globalization. And I think there is no policy in Europe to control immigration or anything like that. I think that the key question here is not actually controlling immigration. The key question is stopping this geopolitical destabilization of Europe. And some countries are attempting to do that. Hungary is attempting to do that. Bulgaria is attempting to a certain extent to do that. In other words, trying to find out who's an actual refugee and who isn't. They're prioritizing women and children, for example, in Hungary. That's a rational approach. But of course, Viktor Orban of Hungary is being demonized by the European Union for his insistence on implementing the laws of the European Union and of a Hungarian nation state. Here, you're in a situation where the French government is totally subordinate to US dictates. This is a country that has been completely taken over by US imperialism, just as Germany. And France doesn't really have a foreign policy. It does whatever Washington tells it to do.
Okay, it's always good to get your thoughts on this. Gerard O'Connell, thanks very much for joining us from Paris this Saturday evening. Well,
promoting the ideas of true freedom and liberty, nonpartisan liberty for all radio with Dave Bourne.
Nonpartisan liberty for all, and we are back. So in one of those interviews, one was actually an interview. One was the report on the neighbor that supposedly was involved in buying the weapons, and they had plans to conduct terrorist attacks before. He gave up his Miranda rights. The whole thing doesn't sound right. One of the things, though, they had talked about in the attacks with France, and then had talked about ISIS, one of the things that they're doing, and this, I think, is a benefit to the U.S., and I think this is basically what they want, is they showed the schools in Afghanistan. So they're educating kids from the age of 3. They're teaching them to kill infidels, to kill non-Muslims, about being suicide bombers. So they're growing up with this stuff. So you're going to have a whole generation. Now, it is only going to be a certain amount of people, of course. I don't know how many kids are in these schools or how many kids are being taught this. And also, I don't know how many ISIS fighters there are, but I guess if they want more, they'll just go out and fucking start paying some more. Because the average, from what I understand, I mean, the average jobs in these countries aren't paying a lot of money. And you had this guy literally say that he did it because he needed to support his family. So if you look at that, if they're paying a lot more money than any other jobs, I mean, of course, you got to realize what you're joining here. You're joining basically a death cult, but they're really not. I mean, any of the cutting off of people's heads and any of that shit, I think it's for the same reason that the Mexican drug lords do it. They're not nuts. They're not that sick, I think. I'm talking about the Mexican drug lords. It's the effect that it has as far as scaring people and really scaring people to fuck with them. I don't think, and maybe you have some people that enjoy it, but I don't think it's something where they're like, oh, great, I get to cut this head off and put it on a stick and I enjoy doing it. I think they're trying to show, hey, this is what's going to happen to you if you fuck with us. And I think in that same vein, ISIS is doing some things to try to scare people. It's all about the fear tactics, because mainly I think the overview, and we only got about 20 minutes left, so I can't go past 10. I really do need to get some sleep. But I think that the overview here is you have the United States. They want to make sure that the U.S. dollar remains the reserve currency, that they are able to continue to sell oil out of OPEC. That's why Saudi Arabia gets away with anything, because they're the main producers, although there are other countries within OPEC. Iraq was, I don't know how that works now, and I don't know the list of countries of OPEC, but I'm sure you could look it up. Then that's their, I guess, world agenda. Then they have the agenda within the United States where they want more power, more control, more government, more laws. As I've said before, and this is my belief, that government is about getting as much control over people and over the land mass that you claim to own. And that's what government is ultimately about. It's not to protect people. It's not. And I had said this, I believe Tuesday when Shire Dude was on, where most people would say, if you ask them what is the point of government or what is the goal of government, and essentially they would probably say to protect people, to maintain an organized society, blah, blah, blah. Now, I think that's the cover of government, and I think that's how it's presented. But I truly believe that government, from the beginning, the purpose is to, just like a business. When you start a business, not everybody, some people are actually somewhat fair to others, and they don't want to conquer the industry with their business and throw everybody else out of business and be the only ones within that business. But it's similar in that you want to grow your business, you want to take a bigger market share, you want more to do. I mean, government only has so much that they should be involved in based on the Constitution. Now, again, I don't think they should be involved in anything, and I don't think they should exist. But once you give somebody power over you, they're going to take more and more power. When you start a government, you're giving people power. So at that point that you start that government and you give that power to people, that's where it starts from. And again, this is what I believe personally. I've never heard anybody else say that. And it's not something that I read in a book. This is my idea. Now, people might think it's a crazy idea. Some people may understand it. They may not, or think it makes sense, but they don't believe in it. But so that's part of it. By having ISIS there, they've put fear in so many people. You have people calling shows talking about ISIS is going to come over here and commit terrorist attacks. And now that you had the one in California, look, they already did. And these are people, I mean, the wife came from another country, but the husband was born here. And basically what they did is almost no different than the people that shot up the post office. Now, they're relating it to being radical Muslims. I don't know. I mean, that's what the government media is saying. So how do I even know that that's true? How do I know that that even had anything to do with it? How do I know that this guy just wasn't a nut and she wasn't a nut who happened to be Muslim? And they went, the word going postal, where postal workers went in, because essentially that's the type of job they had, meaning they didn't deliver mail. But from what I understand, they had a government job, and it was like the equivalent of like a post office. Like they didn't have a government job in an FBI building or in anything like that. And you had these people at your baby shower. Now, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see who was at the baby shower that got killed. And maybe some people got killed by accident. Why the pipe bombs weren't used. And of course, what they always do, and this is the reason for the pipe bombs, they did this with the Boston bombers. They said, they were going to go to New York. And they told a guy who they carjacked, they told him their plan, how they were going to go to New York, which why would you do that in the first place anyway? But that was so like made up. It's so ridiculous. Like they carjacked a guy and said, hey, I'm the guy who did the Boston bombing. And I'll kill you if you don't do what I want or something. I don't know. It was some shit like that. It was something that like a bad screenwriter would write. But how do I know? I mean, I doubt what government media says to that extent. Now, it could be totally true. These people could have had nothing to do with nobody else. Though I tend to doubt that because of the pipe bombs and the FBI's MO. But they could have had nothing to do with the FBI or any terrorist organization. They could have sympathized with maybe not even ISIS. They could have just sympathized with jihad. And it really doesn't make a lot of sense, though, that why work? And so we got in an argument with some guy and then comes back and shoots 14 people. Now, if he came back and shot that guy, okay. And I just really don't know. But if I had to speculate, which is what I'm doing, I would think that this was a total FBI thing. Looking at when it happened, what's going on right now, where you have all the refugees that are coming into the U.S. and people being scared. Now they're going to be more scared. Now Obama gets to come on TV and talk about guns and talk about the no-fly list so he can add whoever he wants. And so to me, yeah, I believe it was a total CIA thing. And there's been cases where people even tried to back out and the CIA essentially wouldn't let them. Now, when I say wouldn't let them, they, I don't know what they did. I don't think they threatened them, but maybe they did. Maybe they said, hey, you back out, we'll kill you because you already know too much information. But they wouldn't even let people back out. But you look at, and this was my main point, all the killings by the U.S. through wars, you look at the Iraq, Afghanistan, what they did in Libya, all the drone bombings, all the Air Force bombings, everything that they have done in the Middle East, essentially for no reason at all. Now, I guess you can justify Afghanistan to find Osama bin Laden, but how the fuck do you attack a whole country to find one person? Now, the Taliban, I guess, they're not the best people or organization either, but to go to a whole war of overthrowing the Taliban to get Osama bin Laden, that would sound like a operation of special forces than a war against the country, if anything. Then you have, of course, Iraq. And you have the Wesley Clark comments about how they're going to go in and destabilize all these countries. Now, how does that benefit them? Well, it benefits them in the fact that if all these countries, and I don't know what their real motivation is, again, I'm speculating, but you have all of these countries that are totally destabilized, that are just a mess. So at any time, there's always going to be terrorist activity. The war on terrorism is never going to go away, and it's never going to allow them, at least in what the U.S. government's going to say is, well, we're always going to have terrorists, so we can't ever go back. We have to keep passing new laws and getting it. Even Obama said in his speech about technology and getting into more technology to make sure that they're not communicating and them not knowing about it. Really, so the husband and wife, what would you have done there to have handled that differently? Because obviously, they were just, talking to each other about it. And because you weren't listening to their conversations. And that's bullshit. If they had them on their radar before, we know all the data is being collected. It's always people that have been investigated before. And that's another red flag to me, because when it's people that have been investigated before, when you're looking at it, you see that there's reason for them to be watching them, be listening to them, and there was contact made. So that's where, at that point, you go to, and I haven't looked at the specifics of all these other things or all these other terrorist plots that the FBI were involved in and how they went about everything, and if these people had been investigated previously or what. But it just, you had the same thing with the brother in the Boston bombing, who I believe was working for the CIA, and they gave that bullshit excuse like they didn't know. So they have, I mean, this is what ultimately happens is they have all this equipment, they're doing all this spying, and they come out and say, well, we don't have enough, so we need to pass a law that says you can't have any technology that we can't hack. We need to take away guns, even though we're being hypocritical saying that it's more dangerous, but you can't have these certain type of guns. And ultimately, the biggest threat to people that live in the borders of the United States is the U.S. government. And they are the ones who have killed a lot more people than ISIS and probably any terrorist group, if you take all the terrorist group combined. So who are you more worried about, ISIS or the U.S. government? Because I'm more worried about the U.S. government, not ISIS. I mean, fuck. ISIS, I can defend myself against them. The U.S. government, I can't. Well, I could always try, but then they're going to kill me. So the bigger threat to me, if anything, is the U.S. government is a bigger threat than ISIS, especially since they're running the ISIS in the first place. So if the CIA is running ISIS, they're one and the same. I don't know how many people that ISIS have killed, but I doubt it's as many as the U.S. government has killed. And I'm talking about, people we don't know about as well. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that the U.S. government has killed that we're not aware of. So ultimately, it's a perfect scenario for the government, for the U.S. government. And every ISIS death is on their hands as well, if that is the case. If the CIA is running ISIS, which to me, there's no doubt in my mind, especially the fact that they're paying people, that ISIS is giving people salaries to join up with them. And they want to use other groups to fight for them anyway. And they have. They used Al-Qaeda, essentially, with Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. They used the Syrian Republican Army. Now they talked about using the Kurds, possibly. So they've used these groups before. Fuck, they used the mafia during, I think, World War II to something with the ports. I think, I don't know if it was in New York or somewhere on the East Coast. And they probably helped use them in the assassination of Kennedy. But the U.S. government is a mafia in itself. So what's the fucking difference? So what do you do with all this information? I don't know. You can, of course, dismiss what I'm saying. The majority of it is fact. As I said, there's a lot of speculation there, but the majority of it is what it is. And we can either sit there and let the government do whatever they want to do, or you can stand up and do something about it. And that's where, to me, it's still non-compliance. Now, how that really affects what goes on here, there's not a lot that you can do, I think, except expose them for who they are. Because when they're doing things like this in other countries, it will eventually affect the U.S. I mean, they're bringing in refugees and they're paying for it. And that's the issue I have, that they're paying to bring people here and then they're giving them welfare and all of that. And that will have an effect. But as far as terrorists, quote unquote terrorists here, that they're probably running, what do you do about that? To me, the best scenario is to stay armed, to stay safe by, keep a fucking gas mask in your car. Shit, keep a bulletproof vest. I mean, I don't know. The chances of you getting killed in a terrorist attack anyway are so slim that they want to act like, oh, these refugees are going to come here and we're all going to die. And that's not the case neither. So you got to remember that the chances of these things happening are so slim. However, it all depends on what the U.S. government wants to happen, because if they want it to happen, it will happen. And I even believe, they'll initiate it, not just let it happen. But they have enough where you can't sit and say that you're spying on everybody, but then miss, all this shit. And like I said, the whole thing with the Boston bomber and the name being misspelled on the ticket, that is such bullshit. They don't have the technology to know that his name was misspelled and pick that up. It's just such bullshit. And at that time, we didn't even know. I mean, I had thought this anyway, but an FBI agent actually came out and said they could retrieve the call between him and his wife. And people were like, well, how can you do that? And he was just like, oh, you can do it. Right, because they're recording everything. So if they really want to go back and review stuff, they can. So, well, that's all we have for tonight. Unfortunately, I really didn't want to go on as long as I did in the beginning regarding LRN, but it was just something that it kind of came up today when I was talking to somebody about it. And I know I said I wouldn't mention Ian again and the shit that he's doing, but the whole FSP, it's like there's backlash as far as I'm concerned in my mind, where I don't, I support what they're doing, but it's almost like I'm against it because I'm sick of hearing him talk about it 20 times a day during the show. If you want to go out and promote it that way, I mean, I guess there's no point because you're in New Hampshire. But if you want to go to another state or go on a tour or advertise or whatever, off of the radio, I mean, why not have a show on LRN, the fucking Free State Project show, where you can talk all about the Free State Project, because I'm sick of fucking hearing that shit. So I'm sorry that, you know, that the listeners kind of had to listen to the rant about LRN and Ian at the beginning of the show, but just something I had to get out there. So I apologize for that. And I appreciate everybody that listens to the show. So thank you for listening. And I hope people will continue to listen, because now I'm getting threats from other people in Las Vegas, you know, that they're going to talk all this shit about me and make stuff up, basically. They didn't say they were going to make stuff up, but basically what they have said is not true. So fine, they want to go tell people lies, go tell people lies. And if you want to waste your time talking about me, go waste your time talking about me. I actually didn't even say anything about that person on the show until after they had sent a threatening message to me. Not threatening like physically threatening, but just threatening, well, I'm going to say this and whatever. So I didn't say anything about that person. I actually should have said what really happened and how they were fucked up to me, but I never did. I never said anything bad. I even wished that person luck. I just didn't want to work with them anymore. So I don't want to get into any more details on that, because I don't even want to talk about it. It's not worth the airtime. So everybody have a good night. I will be back on Tuesday. We may do a Monday show this week because Wednesday we will be off. So I may do a Monday show to make up for that Wednesday show. And next Thursday we have a new co-host starting. So that should be good. Again, Shire Dude is going to join us every other week. So Ken and Shire Dude every other week. And so I hope everybody has a great weekend. And I will see you or hear you, or you'll hear me on definitely Tuesday, but most likely we will do a show Monday. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good weekend. Take care.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every man should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply.